often injuries, often fatalities. Although surprisingly, a lot of times it's just a bunch of near misses. That's okay. I mean, I prefer that. They issue a recall and it gets fixed. Okay. But none of that has anything to do with the computer. Let's call it computer safety. Some people call it software safety, but it's really the computer and the software. None of that has to do with software safety. So none of the automated steering, none of that stuff is covered by these regulations in the slightest. Even electronic throttle control. Remember the Toyota unintended acceleration stuff from a while ago? None of that is covered by FMVSS. So car companies can do whatever they want. And if enough crashes pile up, NHTSA takes a look. But they don't actually, as far as I've ever heard, they don't actually look at the software. They just tell the manufacturer, you got a problem, go fix it. And sometimes the manufacturer says we have a software problem, and sometimes they don't.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Smoking Tire Podcast. I'm Matt Farah, and just a bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. Our new car review video is up. It's the 911 ST versus the 911 GT3 Touring. They are kind of the same, but very, very different, and it's a good one, so go check it out on the YouTube channel. Also, if you want to get the show ahead of time, not listen to ads, and ask us questions for the show and more, the Patreon is right there for you. Patreon.com/The Smoking Tire Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Off the Record, and we have a new discount code for Off the Record, so make sure you update your Off the Record app or download that Off the Record app and use code TSTPOD. TSTPOD is the code for Off the Record now. Make sure you use it. Off the Record is the jam, getting you help with all of those moving violations, big or small. Don't plead guilty. Go to Off the Record. They'll take care of you. All you got to do is scan or photograph your ticket, send it to Off the Record, and they will fight that ticket on your behalf. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to court. You don't have to do paperwork. They will do it all. They have an unbelievable success rate, and if they don't win, you don't pay. It's that simple. We love Off the Record. I love Off the Record. I just got a alleged big one dismissed thanks to Off the Record. Allegedly, I was doing 94 miles an hour in a 70 zone, but it's like it never happened. Got that text a couple months later. Your case has been dismissed, all thanks to Off the Record. Code TSTPOD. That's what you want to do. TSTPOD. And we are happy to have them. We love Off the Record. All right, folks, this is a very interesting and important episode. Calling in from his office at Carnegie Mellon University, Phil Koopman is with us. This is a recommendation from my friend Alex Roy. Phil is a professor. He is one of the world's leading experts in autonomy, ADAS, safety, where we are going right, where we are going wrong, and man, do we learn some scary stuff about the car industry on this one. Phil wrote a book called How Safe is Safe Enough. I have already ordered it. I can't wait to read it. We talk a lot about the topics in those books. I think you guys will like it too. And there are some really, really important topics that Phil has thought very deeply about. And it's great to chat with him. I have a feeling this is going to be a multiple repeat guest because this show was so interesting. Phil Koopman from Carnegie Mellon University, author of How Safe is Safe Enough, is here on the Smoking Tire Podcast. Philip, thank you for joining us today. My friend Alex Roy says, if you want to talk about autonomy, safety, how to do it right, how to do it wrong, Philip Koopman is the guy. And so I'm glad we got an hour of your time to chat today.
Well, cool. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I read some of the links you sent me last night, and a lot of the stuff that you study, and particularly wrote a book about, How Safe is Safe Enough, is stuff that we talk about on the show a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people in America and the world that are relying on technology developed by Silicon Valley and Detroit and other OEMs to save us, and I question that, and I think that you have, but also while studying it. So you're the expert in the field, so I hear.
That's what people tell me. I've been working on this a long time, like 25 years. So yeah, I've learned some things.
Right. Okay. So let's just dive into it. And if the audience can hear the leaf blowers in the back or the snow blowers in the background, Philip's calling in from Carnegie Mellon, where it's snowing. So as we've gotten as cars have become more like computers, right? The idea is they have become safer for those inside the car, for those outside the car, for those in other cars. Do you think that is true? And is where we're going in the right direction generally?
Well, there's a bit of a paradox because the safety features have certainly been added, and the individual safety features, many of them have a demonstrated benefit, and yet road fatalities are up the last couple of years.
Right.
So what's up with that?
Well,
I honestly don't know. If the equipment's safer and road fatalities are up, then that must have something to do that isn't really the equipment, right?
Do you think that while it's so easy for people to say, well, we want safer roads, we want safer cars, do you find that consumers and drivers really do want that? Or do they only want that if they don't have to give up, let's just call it, their toys?
I don't know that I'm going to quite go there because I'm a safety guy, not a consumer car guy, to be clear. But
okay.
But what people say they want and how they act is often different.
Right.
And what we hear is it's very fashionable and it makes you look like a good person to say, I care about safety in general.
Yeah.
And then and people say that and they can be sincere and genuine and really mean it. Then comes the decision you have to make. Do you go for expediency or do you go for safety? Do you go for profit or do you go for safety? Do you go for meeting your deployment deadline, even though the safety guys say it's unsafe, or if the safety guys say we're not entirely sure it's safe, or the safety guys say we don't know if it's safe? There's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And where do you put the cutoff? And it's very hard to find situations where people will say, yeah, I know it's going to cost twice as much, but it's 10% not safe enough, and so we're going to spend money.
Yeah.
That's a hard trade-off for anyone to make. And so people say safety is number one, except for all the other things. That's kind of where you end up sometimes.
Safety's number one, except for profit and cost and,
Well, it's number one, but then individual actions sometimes don't really bear that out. I look at the problems Boeing's been having lately.
Right.
Safety matters, but we have to meet our production quotas, or we have to get our market share back, or we have to compete with Airbus to get a competing plane out. And I'm not trying to specifically say what motivated any of those kind of decisions. I'm just saying that this is the kind of environment that the real world exists in, and it's always hard on a decision by decision basis to prioritize safety when there's a cost associated with it.
Right. I mean, if we're trusting capitalist enterprise to deliver safety, shouldn't that always be a little bit questioned, because there's always got to be a profit motive and it can never be purely about the safety?
Well, yes, but I look at it a different, somewhat non-standard way, I guess. If you want capitalism to prioritize safety, you have to have all the stakeholders pay full freight for the cost of not being safe.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And so if you have a system that undervalues the cost of a human life, then you can expect capitalism to not value the cost of a human life. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
And there's actually numbers on this. And assigning a number on a human life is a very fraught exercise.
Yeah.
So this is a narrow view, and I'm not saying this is the right number, but there's a number. The U.S. government actually has a number.
Right. And what is the published number? Do you I'm sure you know it offhand.
Just north of $12 million per life.
12
and
million?
It goes up
Okay.
by a few 100,000 every year. That's the last number. It was like 12 point something.
Well, famously, right, the Pinto thing, the Ford Pinto thing was the one, I don't know if it was where everybody, but it was certainly a big story where a lot of people learned that Ford did do the math on the value of the life, right? That was a big one.
Yeah, and the catch is their value of the life is different than the one I'm talking about,
Okay.
right? And this is actually at the heart of my point. There's the expected cost of human life that a company will pay out in lawsuits. Okay. And then there's
Uh-huh.
the expected value of a human life. And capitalism is broken if those two numbers aren't aligned.
I see. Okay.
And so if your average court settlement for killing someone is less than 12 million by a lot, which it is, it's a lot less than that, then it's cheaper to make something dangerous and pay out than
Awesome.
from a societal
Awesome.
basis, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, that's now. Where does that number come in? Well, the federal government has to decide. Well, if we put this expensive barrier or guardrails or traffic calming or we completely redo this road to save lives, we
Right.
expect to save X number of lives, and this is how much we can spend to do it, and it be cost effective. I mean, that's how they use the number, which is a
Yeah.
little different than a company deploying car. But the reality is we have a system that has two problems. The first problem is we don't do strong regulation. We do very weak regulation.
Right.
Europe does strong regulation. We do weak regulation. And the rationale for doing weak regulation is we have a strong court system. But then you turn around and everyone complains about the court system being too strong.
That is a
And-
I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a scientist, but that sounds like two things that don't actually line up here. It's not that strong.
They do. Now remember, I'm an engineer. I've been forced to become a little bit of a policy wonk, but I'm an engineer, to be clear. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
I'm not a sociologist.
Noted.
I'm not a politician. I'm not any of those things. But so I'm going to give you an engineer's naive understanding of the system, which is probably overly reductionist. You have a choice. You can have the government make sure cars and airplanes and trains are safe before they ever get out on the road or the tracks or the air. And we do that for air. We do that pretty much for rail. It's a little indirect, but it happens for rail. In fact, it happens for everything except cars.
Yeah, cars is a real
cars,
no I swear system. I swear it's good. It's good.
I listen to your episode with David Zipper, yes. Now consumer goods are like that too, but in cars. So cars are more like consumer goods than airplanes or trains or drugs, okay? Like medical stuff. They're more like that. Okay, so the US government does not vet cars. Car companies just put them out on the road. And even if the US government were to vet cars, none of the current regulations have anything to do with computer software.
That's crazy. I mean, that's like there's two separate thoughts there. The government doesn't vet cars, and the vetting process that would exist or does exist or regulations that exist have nothing to do with software, which controls basically every aspect of a car today. Those are two very scary thoughts to put together and realize.
Yeah. So let's break it down. We're going to get back to value of human life, but let's take this path because it's an important one. So the way this works is, and I know you covered it in the previous episode, so I'll do the short version, is that a car company knows that there's these standards called Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, FMVSS, and they have to do with whether the low tire warning works, or whether your brakes work, or whether your headlights and taillights work, and the airbags. And this is all important stuff for safety, to be sure. And there's a saying that regulations are like this are written in blood, and they are. These are all things where there were bad things happening, and the federal government put in place tests to say, well, at least you have to meet a minimum standard. Mm-hmm. If you meet all of FMVSS, you're not safe just because of that. But if you don't meet it, you're for sure unsafe. Yeah. So most of the recalls you see from NHTSA are for failure to follow FMVSS, because that's the easy thing. Well, you failed our test, so you're done. Fix it. That's a recall. Yeah. Okay. So, but FMVSS isn't tested by NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the car regulators. It's tested by the manufacturers. And they say, I swear, right? I swear it's okay. And they put a sticker on, and that's it. Now, NHTSA can and often does go back and check it out, check up on them, or they hear of reports from the field that indicate there's a problem. And so NHTSA is primarily reactive. If there's bad things happening on the road, they'll issue a recall. And after the harm has been done, or maybe close calls, but often often injuries, often fatalities. Although surprisingly, a lot of times it's just a bunch of near misses. That's okay. I mean, I prefer that. They issue a recall and it gets fixed. Okay. But none of that has anything to do with the computer. Let's call it computer safety. Some people call it software safety, but it's really the computer and the software. None of that has to do with software safety. So none of the automated steering, none of that stuff is covered by these regulations in the slightest. Even electronic throttle control. Remember the Toyota unintended acceleration stuff from a while ago? None of that is covered by FMVSS. So car companies can do whatever they want. And if enough crashes pile up, NHTSA takes a look. But they don't actually, as far as I've ever heard, they don't actually look at the software. They just tell the manufacturer, you got a problem, go fix it. And sometimes the manufacturer says we have a software problem, and sometimes they don't. And NHTSA just doesn't go there.
Well, this is sort of what you've just described there kind of sounds like what just happened with Tesla. And I don't want to turn this into a me shitting on Tesla podcast, but we just had a big story where Tesla was ordered to issue a over-the-air recall of their driver monitoring software for being basically inadequate. And we've known, people who have driven these cars have known for a very long time that their driver monitoring system was basically non-existent. And there was a million ways to get around it, and they issued some software update, and multiple journalists tested cars afterwards and found it to be exactly the same, basically. And there was seemingly no real oversight over what this updated software did, changed, really anything, right?
Well, I hear the fonts are bigger.
Yes, this is very important. Yes, of course.
Very important. The fonts are bigger, yeah. So let's talk about that and wrap it up back in this context. If you're a car company, any car company, and we're using Tesla as an example to be clear, because other car companies have done things that are dubious, to be clear. Okay?
Sure. You sent us the list of recalls, which I went through last night, the list of software-based recalls that caused cars to behave in very sketchy ways. And the list is so long that after about 30 minutes of reading it, I was just like, I was so overwhelmed, and I never want to buy a car again. Like, I'm so sketched out by all of this stuff.
I wrote the list. Welcome to my world. Okay.
Yeah. And we'll come back to the list because there are some biggins in there. But okay, to go back to
this is really important. So to be clear, we're going to use Tesla as an example, but there's other companies who do things. All right. So if you're a company, back to the cost of the human life. If you're a company, if your car is doing something bad and is causing very unsafe situations, this goes all the way back to the Ford Pinto, you're in business to make money. You make an economic trade-off. You say, is the cost of paying out more than or less than the cost of the recall? And if you don't believe me, if you watch the movie Fight Club, there's this scene where the guy talks about it, right? I mean, that is truly how it works, okay? Companies are in business to make money, and if it's to pay out, they're very bad at putting a value or cost on negative publicity, which is how you get stuff like the Pinto or Dieselgate or any of these things. Okay?
Sure.
But ultimately, there's a cost for human life, because you can't make a car that costs $1 million but never kills anyone.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. So we're now down to, there has to be a number. You know, the number from the federal government is 12 million. That seems like a reasonable number to me. It's not 100K or 1 million, which, you know, some of these companies and these fatalities have paid 1-2 million. It's a factor of 10 discount, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the economics. So they look at
this. And if you have an over-the-air recall, if you just have to push a software update, that is, I mean, if the recall affects 1 million cars, but you can have a couple engineers in a couple of days push an over-the-air update, that's way different than having to intake and physically repair those cars.
That's correct. But it better be more than a couple engineers a couple days, because every time you change software, you might break something else.
Sure.
So anytime you hear a recall got pushed out in a week, it is almost certain they didn't do as much testing as they should have for safety critical. It's a different discussion. Okay.
Yeah, that software fix came out real quick. It was almost impossibly quick. You know what I mean?
Well, they had a heads up it was coming, so they may have been working on it in advance, to be fair.
Okay.
Because stuff like that, they don't find out. They wrote the recall. It isn't like they found out the day it was issued.
Right.
They actually write it, and NHTSA just publishes it.
Right? Oh, so it was I swear I've fixed the problem that I swore wasn't a problem. That's where we're at. Yeah.
That they still insist is not a problem. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So the way this works is NHTSA, if there's been a bunch of complaints, incidents, news articles, crash reports, now they have to report the crashes they're aware of. If NHTSA sees a pattern, a trend, they talk to the manufacturer, and they may put pressure on the manufacturer to do a technical notice, or they may technical repair bulletin, or they may put pressure on the manufacturer to do a voluntary recall or eventually a forced recall. And it's a negotiation. So a lot of times NHTSA doesn't get everything they want, but they probably figured I'd rather get a recall now that's 80% than a perfect recall 5 years from now after a court battle. And okay, that's how regulation works. I get that. So NHTSA goes out and says, you need to fix it. And the company says, okay, we fixed it. Here's our story. And NHTSA either has to decide to fight more or issue the recall. Okay. And so for Tesla's done a bunch of recalls. Recalls aren't necessarily bad. If it's an honest mistake and you're fixing it, such things happen. But a lot of the Tesla recalls are Tesla did something that was aggressive, that was pushing the envelope.
Right.
And NHTSA picks its battles where to whack them. It's almost like whack-a-mole with those guys.
Right.
With NHTSA has the hammer out, and Tesla's whack-a-mole. They're always pushing the envelope.
Right.
Right. And then eventually they pushed back. And then Tesla does a recall. Now everyone says it's not a recall. That's ridiculous. It is a recall. Let me get to the difference here. The recall is the paperwork to make sure all the cars got it. And I'm hearing on the internet that not all the cars have it, by the way. So the reason the recall is out there is so NHTSA can track that every car subject to the recall got the remedy. Okay. The over-the-air update is called the remedy.
Yes.
And the recall is the paperwork process. So recall never meant going to the dealer. It never meant that. People are just making that up. It never meant that.
Well, in some cases, a recall could, if it's a defective part.
The remedy.
Oh, the remedy is going to the dealer. I'm sorry.
The remedy
okay,
is going to the
dealer. Got it.
I know it's confusing. Recall as a word evokes going to the dealer, but in fact, these are bureaucrats. They use the words the way they use them, and you can't just say I don't like the word, so it doesn't mean what.
No, it does. It does make sense. The remedy is the action. It's the action.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
And the recall is the administrative process. So everyone says it's not recall. That's just ridiculous. Okay. Now, could NHTSA change the word recall, which was invented before the updates were a thing? Yeah, they might, but that's the word we use now. And you can't say it doesn't mean what it means, okay? So the recall is the paperwork. The remedy is the over-the-air update. And in fact, it's compared to bringing 1 million cars back to dealer. It is obviously easier. There's a moral hazard to doing it quick and dirty and then it not working. One of the car companies is just right now is on its 3rd over-the-air update trying to get it right. So
I drive a Ford Mach-E, and I've had quite a few over-the-air updates, and they've
some of them might be more than once.
Yeah. No, and that is true. I have a very early build, and it was a little glitchy. And so it is what it is. But okay, so but what I said in a previous show with Jason Camisa was that if you have a recall that is due to a good faith effort to build a product that a subsequent defect was found, the wrong part was put on, the wrong tolerance of this, there was an unforeseeable thing, and you have to bring it back and change the part. Versus, as you said, Tesla designed their systems in an intentional way. They were working exactly as Tesla designed them to work, and it was determined that decision was unsafe. That's kind of a difference, right?
That's something I can't recall any time I've seen that from any company other than Tesla.
Guys, we got to take a quick break for today's sponsor, Freeze Pipe. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, that sounds like something for smoking weed. Well, it is. It is a pipe for smoking weed. Smoking cannabis doesn't have to hurt your lungs. You can upgrade to a Freeze Pipe today to experience icy smooth clouds without the throat burn, chest pain, or coughing attacks. Freeze Pipe is an American-owned glass brand that makes a unique line of freezable pipes, bubblers, and bongs that cool smoke by over 300 degrees. This technology was invented back when I was in college, smoking a lot of weed. And when I first used a tube that has the freezable glycerin chamber, oh man, the game was changed. Pop a freeze pipe in the freezer for 1 hour, and as smoke passes through, it's instantly chilled for a pain-free and refreshing experience. Glycerin is a non-toxic gel that freezes quicker than water and stays frozen longer. Smoking a freeze pipe, it's like putting ice cubes in the bong if those ice cubes took steroids, played baseball in the 90s, and beat up Barry Bonds. I'm telling you, if I don't smoke anymore, I did for a long time, but these glycerin-filled pipes were the jam. Man, it was an icy cold smoke. I loved it. And they sent me these freeze pipes to check out. They are beautifully made. They're absolutely highly scientifically functional. They're that kind of glass. They're awesome. Say goodbye to harsh smoke and coughing attacks by shopping for the smoothest pipes, bongs, and bubblers and more at thefreezepipe.com. Use code TIRE for 10% off your entire order. That's thefreezepipe.com, code TIRE, T-I-R-E, for 10% off, priced affordably with free domestic shipping. Order today and start fighting fire with ice. Start smoking fire with ice. That's what I say. Thank you to Freeze Pipe for sponsoring today's show. Right.
So there are the recalls where just no one could have figured that out. That just, wow, okay, we learned a lesson, that kind of recall. And those recalls show the company's trying to be safe.
Right.
Those are a credit to the company. There are recalls where somebody cut corners or was sloppy or in a hurry or had a process that made it too easy to make a mistake. There are a lot of recalls like that. And those are somewhere in the middle that, you know, if you change how you're doing things to not make the mistake again, then that's a safety plus. If you're just, we're going to go fast and loose and clean up the mess as it happens, that's a minus. It's hard to say. But some of the Tesla recalls are, let's roll through stop signs and see how long it takes NHTSA to whack us. I'm not making that up. That actually is a recall. That actually is a recall, right?
Yeah, the programmed California roll. And look, we're in California. There's a reason it's called that. I'm not a saint. I'm not saying I've never done the California roll. I'm not saying that. I have, and let's be honest, I do, in an ongoing basis, roll through stop signs at 2 miles an hour because there's a lot of them and there's visibility. Fine, not a saint. But you got to recognize that to program a car to do that is crazy.
It was fast. Nuts. It was also faster than 2 miles an hour. So
that was a crazy thing to program a car to do. Now, they might argue that they were programming it to drive more human-like as opposed to driving more robot-like, which is a...
Yeah, they were arguing it only did if the intersection was clear. But the problem is, if the intersection is not clear and you make a mistake, you don't see something in the intersection, you hit them, then you've actually been negligent because you broke a traffic law resulting in a loss. That's negligence, right?
Anyway, go on.
Let me go back to where this goes though, is that if you're a company, the question is, what's the cost for putting out unsafe software? And this is an industry problem. And again, Tesla's the poster child, but this is an industry problem. If you can succeed in blaming the driver for not compensating for the fault, there's zero cost to you.
Now that is a hell of an asterisk, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the whole car industry works this way, which is just, the more I learned about it, the more appalled I was, because it's in other industries have this as sort of, everyone knows it's a problem, but the car industry, this is a feature. If you go to the aviation safety standards, it'll say, well, the way we look at something going on in an aircraft and in flight controls is, if this thing goes wrong, what are the chances the pilot can save the plane? Okay. And if it's difficult to control or above, there's actually keep buzzwords, right? You're not allowed to have, the more difficult it is to control, the less you're allowed to have it happen. And they rate the severity of the risk by whether the pilot can be expected to control it. But these are trained pilots who have simulator time on recovering from emergencies. And if they get it wrong, the plane crashes. Go see 737 MAX issues, right?
Sure.
Where they try to blame the pilot, but that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, that story is crazy. I watched the Netflix documentary about the 737 Max, and it was crazy what they did in that entire process.
It's crazy.
Wild.
So let's talk about the car business, okay?
Look at the share price,
The share price, though.
Think of the share
stonks.
price.
It's the stonks, man, right?
Yeah.
I know. I prefer not to go there, but
Yeah.
So let's look at the car industry, and this isn't Tesla. This is everyone, because I know you said in the other show you want to talk about drive-by-wire. So let's.
I do want to work our way to drive-by-wire. Yes,
let's build
I
up
do.
to that. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the car business, in the aviation business, they follow their safety standards, and a plane is safe because the FAA certifies they followed their safety standards. In the car business, for the most part, they do not fully follow their safety standards. They will say they kind of follow them, but every time I've looked under the hood, so to speak, it was more like 10% than 90%. Okay.
No way.
It was, yes, their actual numbers. It was 10% in one case. Yeah.
Wait. So so you're saying that of a book of safety standards, you found in a particular car that only went 10% of the way to being completely followed the safety standards?
There was a particular incident. I don't want to bring up the company because I don't want to make this about a company, but they said they followed a software coding, and this is public info if you know where to look. They said in a court case, they followed a safety critical software guideline. And then when you dug, you found out they followed like 10% of the rules. And then when you dug, you found out that they tried to follow 10%, but they failed at half and they only followed 5%.
Okay.
Well, they used ChatGPT to write the programming and had some.
That was way before ChatGPT. Okay. So now various companies have different cultures, and some do much better than others, and some of the suppliers actually do follow the standards, but the OEMs may not. It's all over the place. So I don't want to tar the industry. It's all over the place. But from an outside point of view, none of them will swear on a stack of Bibles they follow the standard. So, and I know that we should not assume that they're at 99%. That's a really bad assumption. Okay. So they put this stuff out with, the software that's in it. But even if you follow the standard, what the standard says is we're going to give credit for the driver to cleaning up the mess. So for example, if you're, let's say you have unintended acceleration, your car takes off. Okay. And if you look through that list, that's a thing that happens.
Yes.
Okay. Toyota always maintained it didn't happen to them. There's folks who beg to differ. Let's set that aside. It clearly happens.
And there's a variety of it too. And a lot of things on your list, there were multiple items where it was like the brakes won't stop cruise control. Stuff like that. Do not use cruise control because the brakes will not turn it off. Yeah. Like, oh God.
Right. So if you're an automotive engineer and you look at throttle control, let's set EVs a guy. Let's just say it's throttle, even though I know it's not. Okay.
Sure.
On electric vehicles. So acceleration. That's not at the highest level of severity because the presumption is the driver can counteract it by pressing on the brakes.
Right.
Okay.
But if you have throttle by wire and brake by wire and steer by wire,
well, and sometimes they don't do the bookkeeping. For example, if you need a vacuum assist to overcome the throttle, and then they take the vacuum assist pump out of the car, but they still take credit for vacuum assist even though it's not there. That's a real story. Okay. So there's a lot of and then what happens when there's a crash is they blame the driver for not pressing the brakes hard enough. Okay.
And it's like, so and the driver then have to find a way to prove a defense.
Well, the driver is presumed guilty is presumed guilty of not overcoming the
right. The driver would crash. The driver would be presumed guilty. The driver would then sue the car company. The car company would then say, and then they would lose.
And lose, because it's like, well, you should have pressed the brake harder.
Right. Yeah.
And you do stuff like if you lose brake vacuum on a particular car, it takes a couple 100 pounds to stop the vehicle. And who's dying in these car crashes? Little old ladies who weigh 120. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who have leg strength of 110% of their weight or something like that. Well, guess what? They can't press the brake that hard.
Yeah.
And this is all documented, and these kind of things never come out. It's just, well, little ladies are bad drivers, so it's not the car company's fault. Mm-hmm. So where I'm going with this is that we build cars so that if they fail, it's the driver's fault for not compensating for the failure in the typical case. And you have to really go to extremes to prove that the driver could not possibly have done anything. And even then, they still try and blame the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And this is endemic to the whole car industry.
Yeah.
So when you talk about cost of human life, if you can get out of paying for human lives by blaming the victim who's died and can't defend themselves,
Right.
That's it. Really, there's this very difficult problematic economic situation where it's too easy to blame a driver for an equipment malfunction, so there's less pressure to fix them. Now, am I saying, to be clear, some drivers make stupid mistakes and it's their own fault. I get that. Some people drive drunk and have crashes, and they shouldn't have been driving drunk. There's no question about that. But their narrative is, well, some people make mistakes, therefore every crash is a mistake. Well, that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? Sometimes it's the equipment, and that gets rounded down to driver error.
Yeah. In fact, we're having Jesse Singer on the podcast soon, the author of There Are No Accidents, which I can't wait to talk to her. I can't wait to talk to Jesse about There Are No Accidents. Yeah.
She's great. I love her. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay.
go on.
So the recall, NHTSA has to decide if it's worth fighting the fight. And then the company makes the recall. And they usually say no deaths or injuries associated with this that they know of, or that they couldn't blame on the driver. There's a lot of asterisks. So it's a very messy business. I mean, I've sort of wandered around to give you an idea what it's like working in this space, but it's a really messy business.
Sure.
But you know what? All that's going to change. And lots of the industry isn't ready for it. When you take out the driver, you don't have a driver to blame anymore.
Right.
And all this
friend
stuff
is a
going to come
personal injury
out.
lawyer and a very successful personal injury lawyer, and he is like foaming at the mouth. He's like, I'm getting a Gulfstream 5. I'm ready. He is so ready for big number lawsuits with this type of stuff. When I told him about steer-by-wire in the Cybertruck, he was like, oh, should I get blue or black leather in my Gulfstream? He was so ready for it.
You better bring someone with software chops. Because the problem with this is it's very, very difficult to make this stuff reproduce. And people have a hard time believing it if it's not reproducible. Now, computer folks know unreproducible things happen all the time. There's actually physical explanations for things that are inherently not reproducible that are guaranteed to happen. There have been recalls of network switches because of cosmic rays. Really?
Okay. Really?
Yeah.
Cisco had a recall because cosmic rays were just making their routers go berserk. Okay.
Huh,
and
okay.
Enough routers, and this is really a thing. And people are like, oh, that's just crazy. It's like, no. There's a whole book on it. Here's how it happens.
Yeah.
There's data where people looked at a couple hundred servers and they could measure how often it was happening. It's a thing, and it doesn't happen often. But when you have a million cars, it's happening kind of all the time.
Sure.
To
Is
someone.
it possible? I mean, the way you're talking about this, it's almost like, is it even possible for regulators to catch up at this point? Or are they so far behind that we're in a whole new world and it's a free-for-all out there?
Well, there's good news and there's bad news, okay? As always. The good news is there are safety standards written by the industry, all right? So there's this, you talked about the safety books. There's a book, ISO 26262, sorry for the number, that's just what it's called. Right?
Someone's got we need a branding agency to come up with this. We need someone to Hellcatify to come up with a real catchy name for this book, because that's not
They
good.
like their numbers. They like the numbers. And by the way, the fact that I can rattle these numbers off from memory really makes me question my life choices on some of those. But I can. All right. That one, I don't know, 1,200 pages, north of 1,000 pages for sure. 1,200 pages, right? And there you go. Yep. And they're going to take another crack at it. They just launched the Taking Another Crack at It. I'm in the U.S. committee to take another crack and see if we can update it.
Okay.
And that talks about stuff like this. So if you want to make cars that their computers and their electronic equipment are really reliable, life-critical reliable, that standard is an amazing starting point. Everyone can have qualms. All standards are compromises. All standards are political, all that other stuff. But if they just followed the standard, the kind of stuff I'm talking about would have been taken care of. Cosmic rays, oh yeah, it isn't like these guys haven't heard about it. They would take care of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why you're supposed to, not all cars have this, you're supposed to have two computers checking each other, doing your throttle. Some cars have it, some cars don't. But that way, if one of them goes out to lunch, the other one says, hey, dude, you're out to lunch.
Yeah.
We're going to use the spring return to control the throttle or the comparable electric vehicle thing, okay?
Yeah.
But guess what? Those are the standards they're not following.
So, all right. So is it a matter of, okay, we can get the standards updated, and then is it just a matter of applying financial resources to enforce those standards and really enforcing them, or is it?
We can do better. We can do better. Now, I keep saying they're not following them. Again, I said this earlier, but I want to make sure, because I have friends in companies who do their best. There are some companies who are pretty conscientious, some companies who actively reject the standards in writing publicly, and everything in between. All right. But as an industry, there's a race to the bottom if you don't have a requirement for safety, right? And so that's the issue.
Right.
So now it turns out the government has a play here. They could learn to be software safety experts and hire all those people. NHTSA doesn't have the staff quote allocation. They don't have enough. They don't have enough chairs and money to fill the chairs to solve this. And even if they had the money, it would take a decade probably to build up the experience. And I know right now they're trying to hire people in this area, but it's not of the scale that would be required because they're just a small regulator for the size of the industry they regulate. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. But they had a plan during the previous administration. So this is a Republican proposal, all right? Now, I don't want to get political, but Republicans have the reputation of not being particularly regulatory, and Democrats the opposite. So I'm going to tell you about a proposal from the Republican administration, the last administration, okay, that I think is great because what it said was, hey, you guys in industry have some standards. You just saw one of them. There's a couple more. ISO 21448, UL 4600. There's a few more we could add, okay. And the proposal from NHTSA was, hey guys, we're going to make you follow your own standards. Now you don't have to.
Shocking.
We're not going to
development.
check your work.
You must follow your own standards.
We're going to let you grade your own homework. We just need you to swear in a stack of Bibles you're actually following your own standards.
Nothing has ever gone wrong with that kind of regulation.
Well, what went wrong with it? It isn't a regulation because it's been drying up on the vine ever since December 2020 when it was proposed.
Interesting.
Okay? It's made no progress at all. Now, would that fix everything? I'm more of a realist to know if you grade your own homework, there's issues. Although the standards do have requirements for independence so NHTSA doesn't have to check all the details. They just have to check where the independence requirement on the conformance check. So there's actually some lightweight ways for the regulators to apply pressure in the industry because the standards, especially UL 4600, is designed to be extremely friendly to someone who's trying to figure out if someone's really following the standard or not. Okay. So that's something we could do, but we're choosing not to.
Okay. Well, you said in the beginning, Europe is a heavy regulatory area, and we are sort of a light regulatory. I don't think that's the word you used, but it was something like that. If you
close enough. But it's a trade. But the important thing is a trade. They're heavy regulatory, light litigation.
Oh, right. Okay.
We're light litigation, heavy. I'm sorry. We're light. U.S. is light regulation, heavy litigation, and that's a social choice. But the problem, if you're light on both, you don't get safety.
Right.
It's a pay me now, pay me later kind of thing. And if you don't ever pay, you don't get safety.
So let me just ask you, if you go to Europe, does that system result in safer cars and safer roads versus the way we do it?
Generally, what I've seen is they tend to be safer. For example, for electronic throttle control, there's a system the European companies all use, an industry standardized system, not an official international standard that I know of, but there's an industry common practice that has 2 or 3 computers that all cross-check each other called EGAS, and they use that on the throttles. And the systems that have that, you don't really hear a lot of unintended acceleration complaints.
And are
you
those
hear them from the companies that aren't using that?
Right. So but the Audi A4 and the BMW 3 Series that they're selling in Germany, they're the same system in America, right? So
that's correct.
Okay. So it's the cars that are designed and built over there, even if they're sold globally, typically, right?
But a car that's built somewhere else but then sold there will not necessarily have that system. Is that correct?
Or does it need to have it to be
sold?
No,
the regulators don't require. The regulators don't require it. It's just something they do. because they're European car companies, and if they didn't do, they have a different approach to safety than the rest of the world. I'll just put it that way. So they just do it because it's like, now we don't have to worry about this. And the other companies, well, let's save some money, and they worry about it. And sometimes they get it wrong.
Okay. Let's circle back to steer by wire real quick.
I think we're ready for it now.
We touched on it. My gut, I'm not an engineer. I'm not even that smart. My gut, as someone who drives cars, is I don't trust it. I trust an Airbus fly-by-wire system because of all the reasons the FAA and the way they build aircraft. I do not trust steer-by-wire, but that's just my gut. Am I right to not trust it? Should I trust it? What are your thoughts on steer-by-wire?
Well, it depends. You can build steer-by-wire that is safe, for sure. And the aviation people have figured that out. So there's a community, or my research community, because I'm a professor day job, right? And I publish research papers. And there's a whole community that's called the dependability community. It used to be called the fault-tolerant community. And the origins of that community, a lot of the folks came from the folks who did fly-by-wire. And those kind of things. I mean, that's sort of the origins about, hey, guess what? You have an airplane, so one computer isn't going to cut it. We're going to have 3, or we're going to have 4, or we're going to have 9, depending.
Yeah. I just read Fly-by-Wire by William Languish, I think is how you pronounce his last name, and it's an awesome book. Can't recommend it highly enough. Go on.
Cool. So, and I talked to the people at NASA and the people at FAA, and I've done research. I've actually done research work. I'm a co-author of the handbook on how to make the network safe for stuff like fly-by-wire for the FAA. So,
well, then you're the guy. All right.
I get in there. Well, there are a couple of guys that are arguably better, but they're not the ones in the podcast. So shout out to my friends Kevin and Brenda and Michael. Okay, who had author spots before me in that report.
Yeah.
All right. So the deal is that people say we have redundancy, and redundancy isn't enough. You have to be very smart about how you use it. You'll hear all the car companies say, we have redundant computers, so that makes us safe. Well, you know the Ariane 5 story? Ariane 5 Flight 501, first flight of this new rocket, they had 2 computers, and they both failed the same way, and so the rocket crashed, right?
I don't know the story, but what Alex Roy said was to ask you about why the word redundancy doesn't necessarily mean what most people think it means.
Right. Well, I mean, okay, the simple one, and then I'll tell you a war story from my own experience. Okay. The simple one is you have 4 wheels in your car. Is it okay to take one off?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Morgan might tell you differently, but it's probably not.
But they had to move the wheel to make that work, right?
Yeah.
The third wheel. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll tell you a story from my own. This happened to me in my 20s. I was commuting home from work. I was working at the naval base in Newport, Rhode Island, I was a young military officer. There's no way I could afford to live anywhere near Newport. So all of us lived on the other side of the bay. So we commuted over this huge bridge every day. And this bridge is more than 100 feet tall because a U.S. Navy destroyer can sail under it. And it's a 4-lane, 55 mile an hour or something, maybe a 60 then, I don't even know.
Yeah, I know
we're
this
talking,
bridge. It's a big-ass bridge. Yeah, I know exactly the bridge you're talking about.
That is correct.
Yes,
okay.
It's huge.
So I go over the bridge at speed because it's a highway. You go highway speed. And on the other side, there's toll booths. Now, I was going home, so they didn't collect tolls, but there's still booths. You have to sort of thread the needle to go through between the booths going home. Okay. So I crest the hill. And it's like, and I'm speeding up another 5 miles an hour. So it's like, okay, time to put on the brakes. I press the brakes and my brake pedal goes to the floor. With no resistance, it just flops on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay. And so because I've been trained to do it, I press the pedal again. And sure enough, it stayed on the floor.
Yeah.
Those brakes weren't going to do anything. And so I'm just a paranoid because I've had so many things like this happen in my life. I made sure my parking brake, remember the old cables that would always rust?
Sure.
Okay. My parking brake worked because I used it every time I parked my car to make sure there wouldn't be rust buildup. My parking brake worked and it was a manual. And so I aggressively downshifted and used my parking brake to come to a stop by the bottom of the hill.
You were a good driver.
Or I'd be
yes,
dead. Or I'd be dead.
That is the steps. That's what you do.
Yes. Okay. And I didn't spin it. I mean, it was perfect. Okay. All right. So what was the failure mode? Well, I just had my brakes worked on that day, and they bled the brakes. Okay. And so bleeding the brakes caused increased pressure in the hydraulic fluid. And there was a latent crack in the brake fluid reservoir, which is a piece of cast metal. And there was a horizontal crack that popped open with the increased brake pressure that dumped both cylinders.
Yeah.
And I lost all my brakes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. True story.
But your parking brake was a standalone mechanical cable.
Backup. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's called a single point of failure. That car, like all cars, had two completely independent brake systems, except for the single point of failure, which was the housing, which could fail in a way that would let out fluid from both reservoirs. All right. So that's called a single point failure. If you want steer-by-wire, you better not have any single points of failure. And that includes not just different motors for different wheels and different computer networks and different computers. That includes the electrical power supply to the computers. That includes, so maybe one's on the battery, one's on the alternator. What if you have a battery failure and it takes down your whole electric grid in your car? I mean, what if you have computer chips running it that both have a manufacturing defect because they came from the same lot?
Yeah.
What if you have electronic components that fail? What if you have both wires run through the same wire bundle and they both get hit by a piece of road debris and it severs both wires and you lose your steering? Okay. If you're an airplane person, they've learned over decades all the ways these things can go wrong. The car folks haven't had to go through that as much because they could just say, well, the driver will deal with it. But when you take away steering, there's no dealing with it.
That's why that to me is my gut of I don't trust this, because if these systems go down, there is nothing a driver can do with a steering wheel that isn't physically connected to your wheels. Nothing. You're done.
So what the airplane folks did is there was an intermediate generation that was fly-by-wire. So fly-by-wire means you have a stick, control stick and control pedals, mostly control stick. And when you move the stick, it's sending computer network messages back to a computer that moves the air control surfaces.
Right.
That's fly-by-wire, okay? But on the systems, the intermediate systems, I think 767, I'm going by memory, it might not be that particular aircraft, they would have both that as the primary, because there are a lot of reasons why that's a good thing. It actually improves a lot of issues. But they also had a mechanical backup. Probably hydraulic, but I don't know. It's a mechanical backup, just like my mechanical parking brake. Okay, when you remove the mechanical backup, now you had it better work, right?
Right, exactly.
Right, and so the question when you talk about someone going drive-by-wire, how many miles and how many years do they have with drive-by-wire with a mechanical backup so they can learn all the lessons? And if they're going cold turkey, it's all mechanical. Guess what? Now it's all just drive-by-wire. Well, the plane guys were smarter than to do that. So anyone who doesn't have a really well-proven drive-by-wire system that had a mechanical backup, I really have to ask some hard questions about how they're so sure they didn't miss a single point of failure, because they can be so subtle and so nuanced.
And if hypothetically you were a company that was known for doing
move fast and break things, move fast and break things,
and broke things, I would not necessarily trust such a system from a company like that.
Well, there's a way to trust it. Ask to see the certificate for ISO 26262. From an independent conformance check. There are companies in this world whose main purpose in the world is to do independent audits of conformance to these safety standards. And the train guys use them, and consumer electronics use them, and rail uses them. Some automotive uses them. But the question is, does this company use them? And I've never heard of them getting that kind of certification.
Interesting. Okay. Well, and also this your story about your car and your parking brake. We glossed over it a little bit, but just pure redundancy means not only secondary and maybe tertiary systems, but systems that don't use exactly the same type of hardware and maybe same type of software, because if there's a bug in that system, it could be exactly the same in the other ones, right? If they're not different.
They call that a systematic error. And those
Yeah.
are problems, right? And software is the ultimate, because if you put the same software in two computers, it's going to fail. That rocket I mentioned, that's why
Yeah.
it failed. Well, I mean, you can go really down deep the rabbit hole as to why, the why, the why, the why, the why.
Yeah.
But they both had computers that did something they were designed to do, and the designers, it just failed due to lack of. It failed in a very predictable way, but only in hindsight. And they
Yeah.
both failed the same way, so it lost both guidance computers, and the only thing left was to self-destruct, because that was a
Yeah.
rocket. That's what they do, right?
Right. So the Cybertruck has, two electric motors to steer the wheels, but it seems like to have a backup system that's not mechanically linked with like a steering shaft, you need a third rack and pinion electric motor that doesn't do anything until it's like the emergency brake. So then you have this electric motor that sits there kind of dormant for a long time.
But is it one computer running all three? Then you got a single.
I
computer.
don't
I
think
don't
it
know.
is. I don't think it is, but still, again, not an engineer, but to not have a mechanical connection between the wheels that control my direction and a steering device, to me is I
It just
don't
seems
know about
complicated
that.
for something that doesn't need to be complicated.
Well, there are benefits to whatever it is by wire, X by wire, chip by wire, brake by wire. There are benefits to it, but the table stakes to do it safely are quite high.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to. This isn't the shit on Tesla show. That particular system gave me the heebie-jeebies,
Well, look,
and
I mean,
that's how I ended up talking to you in the first place.
From any company, it would give me the heebie-jeebies, to be
Well,
honest.
now
right?
that
'Cause
I've
I
read
held
your
that on
list
my
of your list of software-related recalls that can make cars drive in crazy ways, did not improve my vibes about new cars today.
So let's go there. Why did I do that list? Because I was one of the.
Pull up the list, Zach, and just
There we
scroll
go.
through it and we'll put the link in the show description so everyone can go read it. If you want to have nightmares, I would start by reading this list and then get in your car and drive down the highway.
So let me tell you why I did this list, and then tell you what's in the list. The reason I did this list was I have a talk that I do. There's an hour-long talk about Toyota unintended acceleration with just this incredible laundry list of engineering problems with their system. And what I got from that was, well, you criticized their engineering, but you can't prove it killed someone. Well, a jury thought that it did, but
Okay.
let's set that aside. Okay. People said, no, those are all theoretical problems. There's no case in which software has really hurt or killed someone, or software, the industry is so good, these software problems are all theoretical. It never really happens. And I said, you don't understand. This happens all the time. You're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
So what I did was, a few years ago, I sat down and went through all the NHTSA recall database and just did a search on software and manually curated a list saying, here are all the scary things software has done. And since then, it's probably been 2 years since I've updated this list thoroughly. I put stuff on if it catches my eye, but I have not gone back through the recall list. So I'm sure there's another 20 or 50 things to add here. And these are all things that are just kind of scary. And there's a bunch of them I didn't put on. I've lost track of how often the screen goes black and you lose your rear view camera, which is FMVSS.
Yeah, that one is really frequent. That one happens all the time.
I stopped putting them on the list because and the problem there is they're using everyday software and relying on it for safety, which is just a bad idea.
Yeah.
So anyone who has their infotainment system showing them their vehicle speed and gear and error indications,
Yeah.
you're using a non-safety critical rated system for a safety critical purpose, and you should not expect that to work out well. And that's why we're getting these kind of recalls.
I really recommend everyone goes to this link and reads this. And it's done. It says it's got each manufacturer. It sometimes shows specific models and years of cars, and the kind of stuff that can go wrong. I mean, one really drew my attention was like the F-150 Ford with the 6-speed automatic gearbox would randomly select first gear at any speed. Like it would downshift into first at highway speeds and just like lock up the rears. And people were spinning into ditches.
That
like
is bad.
That's bad. That's really, really bad. And like there was one on a Harley Davidson that had linked brakes by wire. like, and it would lock up the rear brake on a bike. Like, whoa, like no bueno. Like,
and before the hate mail gets started, I want to explain the methodology here, okay? There's a handful of exceptions that are to news articles in reputable sources, but the vast majority have a link to a NHTSA recall document.
yeah, yeah.
All I'm doing is cutting and pasting text from a recall document.
Sure.
So anyone says like, you're making this stuff up. So I'm just copying out of a recall document. That's all this is.
Yeah.
But the problem is it's so tedious and painful to go find this stuff.
Yeah.
The value in this list is just, did you realize what was going on? This is what's going on. I'm just here to tell you what's going on, right?
And it really
it's a
is
link
like
to the document right there.
it's all manufacturers. I mean, I don't know, maybe like Bugatti got away with one or something, but like basically pretty much all mainstream car manufacturers are represented in this list. Yeah. And some commercial trucks and some motorcycles as well. Yeah.
And this is an industry that thinks more software is a good idea.
Yeah. Which actually, I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to just circle back after all of this really to the title of your book, which is something I think is really an interesting question because a lot of pro-autonomy firms and pro-autonomy people and autonomy boosters and bulls, as it were, they're using the backdrop of safety to promote autonomous vehicles, and they so frequently refer to a hypothetical average driver. And I go batshit when I hear about this, as if
As well you should.
as if a driver's ability cannot be improved beyond average. Like we can't bring the skill level of a driver up using training, using concrete and paint, using signs and signals.
Oh no. You're totally missing it, Matt. Okay.
Okay, tell me, talk to me.
The average includes the drunks.
Oh, good. Good. Great. Let's make sure.
So
we factor them in.
We start by saying the average unimpaired, undistracted driver, and you get like a factor of 2 right there.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's better. Okay. Yeah. So
And also they're in an average car, which is 12 years old, so it doesn't have anti-lock brakes, it doesn't have automatic emergency braking, it doesn't have airbags.
Right. To go back
So
there's
you
that
want an
study that
unimpaired driver in a new
Noah, what's
car.
his name? The study that Niedermeyer talks about all the time.
Yeah.
Used.
You drove it out of my head, but it's Noah. That's correct.
Yes, and it talks about when they said autopilot improves this amount of safety, and they left out all these other factors,
Right.
such
They're
as
driving new
vehicle.
cars instead of old cars. They're city miles versus country miles.
Yes,
all that
exactly,
stuff. That's right.
exactly.
That's right.
So, but to your point, where do you have an opinion on what is safe enough if we're talking about handing over control of our vehicles to a computer, or how we might actually good faith ponder such a thing?
It's the wrong question. How's that?
Yeah, okay, what's the right question?
Okay, so if you go to my scholarly publications on my webpage, the most recent paper, which is going to be, we're down to most of your audience is not going to want to go there, so I'll do the summary. Although if you go to my videos, there's a YouTube video that goes through. It is somewhat academic, but I'll give you the short version. Okay, the companies are all trying to sell the robotaxi companies, especially trying to say we're safer than human drivers, so you have a moral imperative to let us on the road.
Right.
Tesla's playing that card. Oh, they're all playing this card. Okay, and there are 2 problems with that. One is we don't know how that's going to turn out, and it's going to be another billion with a B miles before we actually know. Right? All the studies proclaiming that they're safer than a human are their best guess based on current trends. 7 million miles down, another, 193 million more to go, or something.
7 million is like one of those numbers that sounds like a lot, but it really isn't a lot, right?
when you're 100 million between fatalities, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
right?
it's like saying my system is 99% safe, but what we really need is 99.99999% safe, right?
Yeah, it's like 11 nines. It depends how you want to measure it. It's a lot of nines.
11 nines.
It depends if you're going by meter or by second or by hour. Or, you know.
If you do out the
Right.
math, 99% is like a person crashing like badly 2 or 3 times a year. It's like really, really bad, 99%. Yeah.
People
Go
say
up.
six or 7 nines, but that's per hour, and a lot of stuff happens in an hour, so there's a lot of nines.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go
And
on.
it's really, really hard to make computers that good. And so, yeah, you need hundreds of millions of miles, maybe a million miles, how it turns out. All right. But what they're doing is they're saying, well, we're saving lives. Now, there's a problem with that. They won't know if that's true for a billion miles. Nobody will know if that's true, especially if they're not following the safety standards. So there's not even a reason to believe it's true other than they're smart, trust them, right? Okay, we swear. All right, and now, to be clear, there's some good people trying really hard, and I respect that. But as someone who's sharing the road with these vehicles, I'm not going to take the word of somebody who's profit-oriented that trusts us we're safe. We're saving. And then every time there's something bad in the news, people who are not safety experts go look at the bad news. Maybe I should question what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a mistake. I think that's the worst possible move they could have made, because every crash takes away trust and hope. Every crash takes away trust, and they can't get the trust back for another billion miles. So what are they thinking? It's just not the right move. They should be selling on, we're making the cities a better place. I promise not to channel my inner David Zipper here. We're making the cities a better place. We're having all these social benefits, and we promise to do no harm. And we promise every time something wrong happens, we're going to get right on top and fix it. Which is what you didn't see. What you saw from Cruise was
from Cruise, it was really bad.
They're aggressively scaling without fixing the messes they already knew about. Okay, that's not called testing. That's called scaled deployment. Testing is you find something, you fix it. But they were skipping the fixing part, just getting right on.
That's also what one might call full self-driving. That's not testing either. That's just
that's not
sending
testing.
it.
That's
a straight hold my beer status.
That's testing cosplay. Is what it is. Okay.
It is. Because people, when you call it a beta, the people that are using it, there's that button. You feel like you're doing a report. You feel like you're doing research, but there's no process for follow up.
And apparently they don't have enough people to look at all the button presses, is what I hear. But I don't know that for sure. That's just what I hear. Right. Okay. So if you really want to say we're saving lives, you're playing a game you can't win. I mean, it sounds good. When you have 5 cars, you can get away with it because weird things don't happen to 5 cars. But when you have 1,000 cars, weird things happen every day. That's safety. Safety isn't about the good days. It's about the bad days. And the more cars you have, the more days we'll have one bad day for one car in it. And there you are in the newspaper. Okay?
Yeah.
So that is a goal, that we want them to be safer than humans, or at least no worse, for sure. I'm not saying that's not important, but it's not actionable in the near term. It's just hand waving. So what should you do instead? You need a list. And so my latest academic paper actually has this list, and I'm going to be doing I have to put together a talk I'm going to do in a couple months about this, and then there'll be a YouTube video about it. Okay.
Is it going to be on video? Will we have
it'll be on
YouTube.
YouTube.
Share?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
great.
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I can't wait to see that. Cool.
The talk's in like 2 or 3 weeks, so I guess I better get it together. Anyway, the idea, though, behind it is safety is more than just net risk. I mean, now this is a thought experiment. I'm not saying any car company would do this, but I'm going to give you a graphic, evocative thought experiment to prove a point, okay? Let's say the total number of people you killed was half. If I stop speaking there, everyone's like, oh, that's cool, right? Okay. What if every single person you killed was a pedestrian? Which is way more than are killed now.
Right.
What if every single person was
passenger
a child,
deaths went way down, pedestrian deaths go way up.
What if everyone's a child in a school crosswalk and those are the only people who die, and it's 10% of the current fatalities, so you're killing 4,000 kids a year? That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Right? And so the engineers love utilitarian arguments. Well, the net cost went down, so it's a win.
Yeah.
And real life is more granular than that. You just can't say that. It has to be the total goes down, but also there's no patterns that there are winners and losers. It has to almost everyone has to at least come out even or be a winner, or this isn't going to fly. Because the people who are losing are not going to be happy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That makes
So
exact
that's
sense.
one thing.
Yeah,
And people, they aren't talking about this, okay? And pedestrians, I worry about pedestrians. The people in the car have the airbags.
Yeah.
Pedestrians, not so much. So the pedestrians are the ones I worry about.
And pedestrian deaths are way up in the last 10 years
And they're
already.
up.
I mean,
And they're up already.
forgetting
Yeah.
software just due to all kinds of other factors. Yeah.
You want to get in a robotaxi and you've believed all the hype and you get hurt. I mean, I still have sympathy for you, but I have a lot more sympathy for the poor pedestrian who gets hurt.
For sure. We live in Los Angeles, and I say this over and over. There's Tesla. Every third car in my city is a Tesla, and I ride my motorcycle around on these roads. And here in LA, the driving, other than our beautiful mountains, the driving sucks. People are on their phone. If they're told this software, will do most of the driving for them, they're just going to believe it. And
of course they are. And that's what we see.
Yeah.
That's what we see. That's what's happening, right?
And I haven't consented to this bullshit on my motorcycle where if I am hit by a Tesla, I die.
I get that. And a big issue with Tesla, for the reason they had a recall, is there's this legal concept. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV, but I hang out with one on occasion. And there's this legal concept called attractive nuisance. That if you don't put a fence around your swimming pool, it's your fault because kids want to go in swimming pools, right? It's your fault for not putting the fence in, right? And I want attractive nuisance for adults. And, you can argue that autopilot FSD is an attractive nuisance for adults. It just sucks them in, especially with everything they've been told. And so you can blame them for abusing it, but blaming them isn't going to stop the next crash.
Yeah.
And if you care about safety, you don't care about blame. You care about not having the next crash.
I hear you. Absolutely. We have some good questions on our Patreon, and I don't want to keep you. Do you have like 5 to 10 minutes? Or are you in a hurry?
No, I'm not in a hurry. We have some time.
Okay.
Let me add one more thing about safety.
Yeah.
There's a list of like 5, but the other one is it's not okay to break the law. It's not okay to run through stop signs because you say you're a good driver.
Right.
That even if you cut the number of people you kill in half, but everyone was killed because you ran a red light, I'm going to say that's not acceptable to society either.
So could I extrapolate that argument to say that it is not okay to set a radar cruise control system above the speed limit? Do you feel that way as well?
I don't go that far. I'll go this way. Negligence should apply to computers as well as people.
That's fair.
When you press the go button, if the computer acts in a negligent way leading to a loss, the computer should be treated as the guilty party, not the driver who was seduced into playing with their phone, because of course that's what people do, right?
Yeah, because we have short attention spans. Yeah.
If the car company programs in blowing through stop signs and that leads to a crash, you shouldn't say that they have zero responsibility.
I completely agree with you. I didn't know we have a few more Patreon questions from our listeners.
Let's do the questions.
I didn't know. Yeah, no, and I'm going to pick the ones that I think are actually appropriate to topics that we've brought up today. Sure. And one specifically as to what you just mentioned. James Crowley says, "Is there value in a warning beacon for autonomous cars and those using level 2 ADAS? If so, what do you think it would take to be widespread adoption?"
A warning beacon. Well, I think
should a car have a light on the roof that is generally understood to mean this car is being driven by software?
Yeah, in one context that we call that a whoopee light.
Yeah.
So all right. So I think that every test vehicle should have a whoopee light, and if you say that your vehicle is a test vehicle, it should have it, because a test vehicle is not mature software. It's expected to have defects or you wouldn't be testing it. So I think it should have it. I think that's very unlikely to happen, but I think it should.
Well, you saw the Mercedes turquoise lights? Did you see the story on that?
Yeah, I think those are kind of interesting because they're not claiming they're testing. They're claiming they have a mature product, and they're just trying to say, hey, you should understand we might behave differently because the computer's driving. Although interesting part about Mercedes, their PR people probably hate me because I just won't let it drop. So I'm going to bring it up here. They say you can play games and watch a movie, but they won't say that it's their fault if they have a crash.
Oh, really? I thought the whole point of their, quote, level 3 system was that they do assume responsibility.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. When you read closely, and you have to read closely, okay? But I've read the direct material from Mercedes, okay? And I've read what they said, the reporters, I've read the public stuff. What they say is we assume product liability. Well, of course they do, right? But we weren't talking about product liability. We were talking about tort liability. We were talking about lawsuits that you ran someone over and they're suing you for wrongful death. They're not talking about that at all. They don't talk about that.
I fell for it.
Right.
Damn it.
Yes, you did. And that was the
fell for
intended
it.
result, near as I can tell. Everyone's fallen for it.
Man.
That's why I'm on the soapbox. They're not talking about civil or criminal liability. They're talking about product defects, which of course they are. You can't
Man,
handle
that sucks. I fucking fell for it. That sucks. All right, I'm not gonna say that ever again. Okay.
If you really want the details, I'll send them to you. But in fact, one of my papers in my list of papers, one of my papers sort of explains all that.
Oh man. All right. Well, I would like to read that, and I fell for it. Okay. Good on you for the correction there.
You and 90% of the press, 99% of the press. They don't.
Yeah. It's crazy. Randy says, can you foresee any solutions for making autonomous vehicles work in Pittsburgh winters? Snow and ice, and man, that's a tough one. I don't know about that.
It's snowing today, and I told my wife I'm not going out. She's going to have to walk to work, which is a 10-minute walk. It's not that big a deal. So, yeah, there are actually some really cool videos of these guys in Finland, these insane people in Finland who got their autonomous vehicles going through the snow and doing drifts and all this other stuff. You can absolutely do it if you want to. Whether or not that's really how you want to spend your research dollars and whether that's okay for a crowded city is sort of a different question. So in principle, yeah, but it's a whole different skill set than normal driving.
Yeah, I think it would be better. I think as long as you still have manual control of a vehicle, there are situations where it doesn't necessarily need to. You don't need it to work in a snowstorm for it to be good.
So I doubt in my lifetime we're going to see vehicles that can do everything everywhere because there's no economic reason to do it. I mean, so they have trucks that go on railroads, right? And the trucks go out and they inspect the signals and do this. Technically, if a truck you build can't be modified to do that, it's not a level 5 does everything, right?
Right.
Does it make or being able to put a truck up on a service lift or being able to put it on a car carrier or, I mean, eventually, but should you let those stop you from selling cars? No, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah. Let's see. Prashant says, are we reaching the limits of Moore's law, and does that have any effect on the advancement of automation and AI in general, or are there other limiting factors besides computing power that hold us back from autonomous vehicles?
Okay, some background. Moore's law was this observation made by an Intel guy a long time ago that computing power was going to double every year. I'm doing the simple version. Computer power is going to double and double and double and double. And after 10 doublings, that's 1,000 times. So it adds up really quick. Okay. And since I've been a computer engineer, which is a long time, people are saying, we're going to run out of Moore's law any day now. Right. And they haven't. So the doubling has changed its nature. And what you're seeing is instead of single computers getting faster, you're seeing more computers being put on the chip, like GPUs, like lots of computers all working together. So I think that the industry is finding a way to get more computing power. It no longer is just turning the clock up so it runs faster. That sort of stopped a while ago. Now they're doing other things, but we're gonna have as much compute power as we want. That there are some things you need a certain amount, like deep learning and ChatGPT and all that stuff needed a certain amount of compute power that can be done. So new things will be possible as we get more compute power, but I don't see running out of compute power being the problem. It's more like coming up with software that does stuff we find useful.
Cool. 2 more questions and then we'll let you go. Justin says, do you ever get tired of the trolley problem memes?
Trolley problem? I've never heard. Oh my God, save me from the trolley problem. the trolley problem. All right, so this is going to take an unexpected twist. The original trolley problem is not what you think. The trolley problem is, everyone says the trolley problem is, well, there's one person on a track and there's 5 people on track and you're going to hit the 5. Do you switch to kill the 1 instead of the 5? But that's not actually the original paper. If you read the original paper, it says, why are people okay with killing 1 to save 5 when they're not okay to do organ harvesting where you take a perfectly healthy person and kill them to save 5 people who need organs? That was the original paper.
It seems like that's missing the crucial context.
Right. Yes, it is. It is. But actually, it's coming back. So let me tie this together, okay? The original paper, why are we okay with that? We're not okay with organ harvesting. Believe, I'm not okay with organ harvesting from healthy people. Trust me, okay? After you've died, it's a whole different deal. That's not what we're talking about here, okay? I'm not okay with intentionally killing people to save other people. And I think that and then people say, why are many people okay with killing 1 to save 5? Not everyone is, to be clear, and that gets controversial. But the point of the original paper, I went back and read the original paper because someone said this, and that is what it says, is that it's more complicated than net number of people killed. The context matters.
Yeah.
So now when you have people saying, well, it's okay to kill people with immature driving technology because we're going to save more people later, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so is it okay that the people killed are going to be the people who couldn't afford the car?
Right.
Right.
And it goes back to what you said earlier about you're saving lives, but you kill more pedestrians or you kill more school kids or run over more dogs or whatever. Yeah.
And people want to make it about, well, the homeless person or the doctor who's saving lives or the religious person. They want to make, or the baby versus the old person. They want to make it about the value of the human life.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong question. The question is it okay to put dangerous technology out in the public where it's going to imperil people who didn't sign up? Because maybe, and we don't even know if it's true yet, maybe someday you'll save some lives. Yeah. That's the trolley problem that matters. It's not the one that gets all the press, but that's the one that matters.
That context is so important.
Yes, it is.
I just learned another one where the second half of it is completely ignored. Can you pull up the quote, Zach? The rest of the sentence that begins imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I'm sure everyone knows that quote. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Do you know what the rest of the sentence is?
I don't. I'm eager to learn something today.
It provides very important context to the first part of the sentence. It says, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. which is important context to provide to that. It's from Oscar Wilde.
Oh my God!
Right? If you fucking put a period after flattery, it's not really the same thing, is it?
No, it's not.
It's a pretty hard call out if you use the whole sentence. Pretty brutal. Okay, very last question, and then we'll let Phil go. It has absolutely nothing to do with your work in autonomy. Can we go back to the page so I can read it? Go up top, very top. Michael Cosgrove was always fascinated by the Carnegie Mellon story of their Coke machine inventory status hack. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yes, because when I got my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, and when I was a PhD student, that was operational. So they took a Coke machine and they hooked up an internet-connected computer, which is a big deal back then because we're talking
80s,
the mid 80s, late 80s, right? And you could go in and over the computer network, because I remember doing this just because it was so fun. Hey, I'm a geek. What can I say? You would say, "Hey, Coke machine, what's going on?" And it would say, "Oh, I have 17 cans of Coke, of which 8 are cold and the rest are warm. And I have so many cans of this, and here's how many are cold, here how many are warm." That was, you could find out. And the reason they did it, besides it just being a completely amazing geek hack, was to save walking down to the machine to find out it was out of your favorite flavor of Coke.
I mean, in the 80s, that was what nerds did to have a good time. It's very efficient.
That's right. That's right. That's
very
right. So
efficient use of your
I take
time.
no credit. I take no credit for that hack, but I actually remember it being there, and I remember using it.
Would you like to play a game? How do you feel about the movie War Games?
Well, all the Hollywood stuff is usually pretty oversimplified.
What do you think is
Although-
the best?
although
What is
to
the
be
best
clear,
example?
default
Let's go the
passwords-
other way. What's the best? The other way. What's the best way? The best Hollywood example of tech? Do you have a good one that you
Good.
like?
Good tech. I mean, I like the Matrix movies. Those are pretty cool. They're thought provoking, right? Those are good.
Yeah.
Are
There's
they
some other ones.
realistic? I'm real freaked out right now.
You know what? The most realistic tech movie is Hunt for Red October.
Oh, with the missile codes.
With the way the sonar worked and the way all the
I
because
just confused it for Crimson Tide. I'm sorry.
No, not
My
Crimson
bad.
Tide.
My bad.
Well,
I know
no,
Hunt for
that
Red
one-
October. Sean Connery.
My understanding is Crimson Tide is pretty realistic, but I didn't actually do that job. But I did do the Hunt for Red October job.
What do you
in
mean
real
the
life.
job?
I
Oh,
used
the
to-
job. Oh, Oh, really? Oh, cool.
I drove submarines for a living right about then. Yes.
Kicks ass. Oh boy,
And
now
so
we have
that
something to talk
movie-
about next show. That rules.
That movie is extremely realistic.
Except for Sean's Russian accent.
Well, the technical stuff is extremely realistic, and I even know one of the guys, this guy George Billy, he's the short blonde guy in the mini sub in the movie, right? He's a real Navy officer, and I spent uncountable hours with him taking turns on a periscope someplace I can't talk about. Right before they made that movie. So,
Oh, wow, cool.
He actually knows his stuff, and I know where a lot of the sayings and quotes came from because I know this
Oh,
guy.
how interesting. So that
So
would
I have
actually
an
make
indirect
you,
relationship.
You're the second. What do you call the person who drives the sub? What is that title?
Oh, so the guy who drives the sub, there's the officer of the deck. He's basically, there's the captain, but every night, so for the later part of my career, the captain would be asleep, and I would run the ship from midnight to 6 a.m. while the captain was sleeping. I'd still had to ask him for permission and stuff. But the guy who's running the ship when the captain's not actually there in the room is called the officer of the deck. And that I had that job for a while. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you're the second person on our show who has driven military watercraft. We had Jesse Iwuji, who is a race car driver now. He's a NASCAR driver, and he drove destroyers.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or targets, as we call them in the submarine world.
That's fucking cold, bro. Oh, wow. Phil, this was so interesting. Thank you so much for your time. I think these topics are really important. I can't wait to see your lecture on YouTube. I'll make sure to share that on the socials. We'll put all of the links of stuff that we talked about in the show notes. I really encourage everybody to read that list of recalls and have nightmares for a couple days because it's really, 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 really gnarly. And of course, your book is available where people buy books. Please buy it. Order it from your local bookstore. Don't buy it from you know who. He doesn't need another 550-foot yacht. How safe is safe enough? Measuring and predicting autonomous vehicle safety. I ordered it myself last night. I'm gonna get it and
Cool,
have a
thanks.
read. Yeah. So thank you so much again for your time, Phil. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
All right. And thank you to our patrons for asking such good questions today. And we'll see you later this week. Bye.